Good evening, everybody, and welcome to History Author Talks. I know it's been a few weeks since we've had the opportunity to get together, but I'm glad that that you're all with us this evening, and I'm looking forward to this show. I've known our guest here for a number of months and had the opportunity to talk with him about this project early on. And I think that we have something very special here. Just to give you a few updates, this being moving into December here, we're moving into the 10 Crucial Days historic era period. This weekend at Washington Crossing, we have the reenactment of Washington crossing the Delaware, and over on the Jersey side and Jersey Landing, of course, they are having some activities on the New Jersey side of the river as well. We have as we do every year, 10crucialdays.org. We have our bus tours, and you can learn more about our bus tours at 10crucialdays.org. There's some more exciting news going on here in the 10 Crucial Days. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold, so you're going to have to deal a little bit with that. In the 10 Crucial Days historic area, the American Battlefield Trust has announced its Washington Legacy Program to reinterpret the Princeton battlefield. So I encourage you to go take a look at pbs1777.org. That's the Princeton Battlefield website, and you can learn more about what is going on in terms of our work on the Princeton battlefield. And that is the culminating event at Princeton battlefield is on this year is going to be on January 7th. At Princeton battlefield, we're going to have the reenactment. And of course, we have a bus tour just before the reenactment as well. So that's just a few local things that are going on. Wanted to let you know about that I wanted to let you know about. And now I'd like to bring in our guest. Tom Hand graduated from West Point, the class of 1982, and created the Gilmore Cheese Corporation after leaving the military. Now retired, Tom spends most of his time on his project, Americana Corner, which we're going to talk about tonight, and also serves on the board of trustees of the aforementioned American Battlefield Trust. So with that, I am very pleased to introduce you all to Tom Hand. Welcome, Tom. Welcome to History Author Talks.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. It's great to be here. Appreciate
Well,
you having me on.
absolutely, absolutely. As you know, I'm a big fan of your work. So we're going to cover a few different areas of that tonight. And first thing, I need to mute a few wayward. Okay, there we go. We're all muted. Okay, so well, what everybody I know wants to know first, more than anything else, you went from West Point to cheese.
I
Explain
did.
explain the Gilmore Cheese Company. It's a fascinating story. I want you to tell the folks.
Well, yeah, I spent 4 years at Fort Bragg after graduation and left the service. Wasn't much going on, to be honest, in the service at that time, and went to Procter & Gamble for a couple of years. I wasn't a big corporation guy. I wanted to have my own show, and a buddy of mine who knew of this opportunity in northern Wisconsin called me, and I jumped in with both feet, and that was back in '94. And we grew it to a size that was of interest to a private equity firm. And we sold it in 2019, and it was just a great blessing. But I tell you, Roger, the beginning was a little bit rocky. I made every mistake you could make, but the good Lord took care of us, and we survived.
Well, that's terrific. And of course, with that opportunity, it has brought you into the field of public history. Tom, were you? I've never asked you this question. Were you a big history buff before all this happened, or how did you get into history?
Yeah, I was always been a big history buff. We grew up in pretty hard scrabble circumstances back home, and but my mom bought me a book on the Civil War when I was 12, got me hooked on Robert E. Lee, and which is one reason I went to West Point. And then yeah, I've always been a history buff. In fact, our cheese factory had about 12 portraits throughout the factory of like Washington crossing the Delaware, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and the FDA inspectors always gave me a hard time, but we kept them up.
They gave you a hard time for having historic art.
Well, they said they'd never seen history pictures in a cheese factory before, but they let them stand.
Well, so excuse me. Were there teachers involved while you were in school? I mean, is was this a subject that you excelled in?
Yeah, I suppose I can't think of any particular teacher that stands out. It just resonated with me. Probably like most of the people on the call tonight, we just have a natural affinity for our nation's history, and so it wasn't anything exceptional. I think, as I said, people on the call tonight probably love the history like I do, and it just felt right to read about American history and then to start writing about it, which I did in 2019 after I sold the factory.
So the writing of the blog came first. I mean, tell us about Americana Corner. And before actually
Yeah, sure.
before you do, let me just say to everybody, so it is americanacorner.com. And for those of you who have joined us this evening who have not been to americanacorner.com, I know all of you pretty well at this point. I've seen so many of you in my shows, and I'm very grateful for you joining me. But if you have not been to Americana Corner, you've got to do yourself a treat because he's got a lot of really great programs. So tell us, Tom, how did this all start? How did Americana
Yeah,
Corner?
thank you. I appreciate that, Roger. It's we're pleased with the website. Yeah, I wanted to remind my fellow Americans um, about their nation's incredible history, and also to remind them of the inspirational nature of our founding era. I'm concerned that we're starting to lose sight of that, and so I created AmericanaCorner.com and started writing early American history stories on America's first century in 2020, I think it was. And now we put out a story of about 800 words or so every Tuesday. And every Friday, a corresponding 2.5-minute video on the same subject. And it's been a real blessing to do that. But I felt like I could do even more to help preserve our nation's history. Sharon and I were blessed with a lot of financial resources from the cheese factory I never expected to have, to be honest. And so I thought if I could give money to early American history organizations, I can help them tell their part of the great American story. And so I started the Preserving America grant program. And to date, we've given away about 200 grants to organizations in 37 different states and the District of Columbia, totaling about $1.6 million. And we're in another grant cycle right now. And I'll just mention that if any of the people out there have a 501c3 with which they're affiliated and focused on America's first century, I would encourage you to apply. We have our third season of grants. Window is open right now. It closes December 15th. But if you want to apply for a grant, there are $5,000 to $10,000 grants. They get more competitive each year. It seems like last year we gave about 50% of the applicants received money. And this year we're hoping to give away $1 million. And the grants are all announced on Washington's birthday each year. It's a fitting day. I get a chance to play Santa Claus every year, and it's kind of fun.
So, well, let's talk about the grants in a little more detail later on. I want to know a little bit more about your process for Americana Corner.
I'm sorry.
Is it interesting?
My first
No,
question
hasn't
is,
even started.
my first question is, do you ever sleep? I mean, how you must have. I have this vision of this room full of researchers, and how do you do this?
Honestly, it's I do all the research, all the writing, all the videos myself. I take care of all the grant application requests. I vet them, vet the organization. Behind the scenes, I have a great partner in Sherry Breen. She's the genius behind the quality of the website and the videos that you see, and the book that we put out. She probably has a cadre of 8 to 12 people that do book layouts, that do video presentations, that do all kinds of things. But all the content is written and researched by me, and all the applications come through me, and I correspond with every single person, organization that sends in an application. If they have if they take the time to send in an application, I need to personally contact them. And so there's a lot of give and take on these applications. Rather than getting them in and seeing one we don't like, I'll contact an organization and I'll say, this isn't exactly what we want to do. Can we take a look at something else? And I'll walk them through the things that we like, and some of the things that we don't like, just so that it's more of a collaborative effort, I guess. And then, and so that's Americana Corner. It's really me and Sherry doing all the work.
Well, so let's talk a little bit more about the bigger picture. You mentioned that you have a concern that our fellow citizens are not getting enough of the history. There's other factions of our society who argue that the founding era has been glorified and whitewashed. And what's your feeling about that? How do you respond to that?
Well, I think we wouldn't have our country if it wasn't for the founding era. I mean, that's in a nutshell. And you certainly can find fault if you're looking for it in anyone. We can't lose sight of what they created out of nothing, with no real precedent to look at. I mean, you can go back to the Greek city-states, I suppose, if you really want to argue that. But in that time period, we were it, and what they crafted was remarkable. The Constitution, having the strength, the perseverance to break away from the strongest power in the world. What they did was simply remarkable, and it's not in vogue right now to feel strongly about the founders. I don't understand that at all. I don't see how we can lose sight of that, but I think the pendulum swings, and it's going to swing back towards, I think, a greater respect for our founding era. At least I hope so.
And with the conversations that we're having, I mentioned to you before we started the program here that I just came back from the National Council for the Social Studies conference, which is about 2,000 social studies teachers talking about different ways of engaging with their students. What do you think that will engage students nowadays in learning about our history?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't have a silver bullet answer. You know, I don't know. I think part of the process is a nationwide neglect issue. I think I don't know if it's being taught at home the way it used to be. You know, the teachers they teach what they are being taught in college, I think, and I think there's some different practices in college than what I would have. And so I don't have a good answer for that, Roger. I don't know what the answer is, but it's not a short-term thing. It's not as it's going to take time. It took time to get here. You know, when we grew up, it wasn't like this. And over the course of the last 30, 40 years, it's gotten to this point. It can be turned back, and it will be turned back. I believe that, but it's not going to be an overnight solution. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of hard work on the part of people like who's on the call tonight to keep pushing back against those that would, I guess, defame our founding generation.
So let's talk about your latest project, American Triumph. We just put this up on the screen for everybody. I want everyone to at least see the cover. Let me just bear with me for a moment here and get to this. Oh, for some reason I can't find it. Let's see here. Oh, I'll have to look for it a little bit later. We'll show you the cover for American Triumph. It's both biographical and a chronological, very spirited narrative on the Revolutionary era, all the way through to the quasi-war. So you're following all the way through to John Adams' presidency. What was the impetus for putting together the material in book form?
Yeah, I wanted to create a book for the everyday American and who loves the country as much as I do. And I wanted to give him a book that would be informative and inspirational, but also a visual masterpiece that included tons of full color pictures and beautiful maps. There's just the best way to convey the spirit of the times in my mind is through the paintings and the images from back in the day. And who doesn't love to have a map in their hand as they're reading through a story to know where you are in space? And so that's why I created Americana Corner. I wanted to create something that was entertaining for the everyday American, but to do that, I wanted to have this coffee table quality about it. We talked to some publishers, and it was going to be a $60, $70 book. The everyday American can't afford that. You know, the guys that worked in my cheese factory, they couldn't have afforded that. And so I created Americana Corner Press, my own publishing house. And now we're selling it for $35 on Amazon. And so the average American can get it, and they'll have a high quality book. And I felt like this was a way that I could kind of contribute to preserving a nation's history, to put it in the hands of common Americans that they love reading about this stuff. The comments I get from a lot of my buddies who aren't deep into history the way that I am is that they don't want to read a 500-page book on one guy. It's too divey, is a term I keep hearing. It's too much information. And so I created a book that I felt was handleable by the common man, affordable, and would still be entertaining. And so it's a long answer to your question, but that's how and why I created it. And I have to say I'm really pleased. Oh, thank you. There it is. Yeah.
So I'm going to do something I don't think I've ever done before. I mean, my audience knows that I tend to love the books that I for the authors that I interview. That's why I interview them. Um, but I'm going to answer a question that I asked you a little earlier. I asked
Okay.
you, what do you think engages kids today? And my answer, if you'll allow me on your behalf, is your videos. Your videos capture the moment of what your blog posts tell in more detail. And your writing style, just as you've said, is very accessible. You know, I'm one of these geeky guys, and many of the people on our in our audience have probably have bookshelves that look like yours and do a deep dive. I must have, I don't know, 300-400 books. I can't even, I don't even count how many books I have on the American Revolution alone.
Mhm.
And some are those big door stoppers. But what you have accomplished with American Triumph is a introduction to the American Revolution and our founding fathers that can make pretty much any citizen above a ninth grade reading level sound as if they have studied the American Revolution for a long time. It's not too much information. It's great, it's great writing, and I love the way you explain each of the founding fathers, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but it follows through the whole book. You get the whole story of the American Revolution, why it came about, what happened, and then what happened afterward. Um, so I well done. I commend you.
Well, thank
And for everybody out there, Tom mentioned that it's available online. You can also go to americanacorner.com, and he's selling autographed copies. So if you're looking for Christmas presents, holiday
you.
gifts, that's where you need to go.
Thank
So,
you, Robert. Yeah, that's very kind of you. Very kind.
well, you did the work. Um, so you really you focus the book while you tell the story of the whole revolution. You focus the book on I guess the trifecta of the founding fathers here: Washington, Franklin, and Adams. Um,
Right.
how much of a struggle was it for you to pick those three as opposed to some others that you know that you may have considered?
It wasn't a struggle. I've read bios on most of the founders, Madison, Jefferson, Hamilton, those guys, and it's interesting, Roger. You're a historian yourself. Sometimes it just connects, and you say, you know what, that guy, he got it. He understood it. Clearly, Washington, and indispensable man, right? Ben Franklin. We don't know it today. We don't talk about it today, but Ben Franklin was the man before George Washington was the man. I mean, he was nobody excelled Ben Franklin, and John Adams, the unsung hero of the American Revolution. King George and the ministers in England blamed John Adams more than anybody else for the revolution. So it speaks about how he was felt back then, how he was revered and considered back then. And all the other ones, I won't go into their flaws. We all have flaws, but answer your question, it wasn't hard at all. Those are my three favorites, and they have been for a long time.
So
Who are
who
your favorite guys? I should ask you that.
who is my favorite guy? Well, I that's like asking who's what's my favorite book. You
Okay.
know, there's so much depth, um, both good and bad, for all three of them. Although I don't know there's much bad about Adams, but we can take a look at Washington. And I do one of the tours that I do is a leadership tour, and I always start that leadership tour with a comment that I got from one of Brookhiser's books, that George Washington was America's first CEO. He had two startups, the United States Army and the United States government.
Yeah, I suppose.
And indeed, so many of what our founders were doing, they were flying by the seat of their pants. They were just trying to figure it out. And Washington, who showed up in Congress in his uniform, and when they were trying to determine who the commanding general was going to be, they all turned to the guy in the uniform and said, well, I guess it should be you. Of course, it's a little deeper than that. We know that they wanted the Virginian in control of these New England troops, but George
It
Washington
was John Adams who made the nomination.
Yeah, exactly. And George Washington turns around and says, "Who, me? You know, how could you have settled upon that?" But then he was like the dog that caught the car. This gentleman from Virginia who had never commanded more than a regiment is now in command of the entire army, and he had to figure out how to pull all of this together. And he was brilliant in the way he found these young officers that he surrounded himself with. In your book, The American Triumph, you have sidebars throughout the book, which give us some extra insight. Who's calling me tonight? This is everyone's calling me tonight. So it gives us extra insight into not only Washington, Franklin, and Adams, but many of the supporting cast. Who were some of your favorites?
The supporting cast?
Yeah.
Nathaniel Green is going to be up there. And in fact, he's going to be one of the featured guys in book number 2 that I just completed last weekend.
Okay.
George Rogers Clark. He basically captured the Ohio country, Illinois country for America, and redrew the map because they redrew the map of the Treaty of Paris because of him. Henry Knox, devoted to General Washington. Some of the other unsung guys, Roger Sherman, made every major conference there was, and pretty quiet guy from Rhode Island, but anyway, or Connecticut, excuse me.
Connecticut, yeah.
But just yeah, so those are some of the other ones. Benedict Arnold, people are going to groan a little bit, but Benedict Arnold was instrumental in getting us to 1776 by what he did at Valcour Island. People don't talk much about that. Hugely heroic, courageous, devoted to America until he wasn't. And the last one I'll just mention is Daniel Morgan. A mountain of a man, as talented on the battlefield as anyone we produced in the American Revolution. Hardly anybody knows about him, and that's a shame.
We our next program, in fact, is with Jack Kelly, who is in fact today is the publication date for Jack Kelly's book on Benedict Arnold, and he's going to be on the show. I think it's December 12th. I'm pretty sure that's
the Valcour Island book, right?
No, that was his last book. This is
that's what I thought. Yeah, right.
Yeah, this is his new book on specifically on Benedict Arnold. Excuse me. And Henry Knox, I think, is a fascinating character. Today, I think it's today. Today is the anniversary of Henry Knox getting to Fort Ticonderoga. And
Okay, I didn't know that.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's either today or yesterday. And he had this was a 24-year-old bookseller who was who joined the militia, the artillery militia, blew off a few of his fingers, but as Tom said, stayed with Washington from the beginning of the war until the very, very end. And he was our first, what in essence was our first Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense, really.
Of War and Defense, yeah, that's right.
Secretary of War, yeah. So a fascinating, absolutely fascinating character, indeed. Well, so I've described the American Revolution as a rather a brutal tennis match. I mean, both sides scoring points back and forth, played in 3 sets. New England, the Middle Colonies, and then the South. What do you look at as the turning points? One of my clients is writing a book called The Turning Points, plural, of the American Revolution.
So before I answer that question, I'm going to just correct you. It was a 4-set match. You forgot the American Revolution in the West.
Well,
And it's interesting. I won't get on my soapbox about that because I'm just finishing up a story on George Rogers Clark, but the man arguably responsible for the capture of the greatest amount of territory in our nation's history was George Rogers Clark. He basically captured the entire 7-state area, the Northwest Territory. It wasn't heavily defended, that's true, but anyway. So
yeah, no, that's a very good point. And to correct myself even further, we all focus, as you have in your book, and so many have. We really all focus on what happened on land. For every engagement on land, and Glenn Williams, who's a historian of note,
Yep.
pointed out that there were some. Oh no, I'm sorry, it wasn't Glenn Williams. It was Mark Lender, who pointed out that there were some 1,600 engagements altogether, and 10 times as many engagements on the sea. The action on the waters, the privateers and the Navy, the fledgling Navy, United States Navy against the Royal Navy. There were so many actions on the maritime in the maritime theater that a lot of people don't know about. So there's so many stories. We've got a long way to go, for sure. But what about the turning points in the Eastern theater, we'll call it?
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's anything revolutionary, no pun intended, with what I'm going to say, but certainly Saratoga brought in the French. Crossing the Delaware, everybody, of course, on the call is familiar with Washington's story, but it's just hard to imagine that the army had dwindled from 16,000 men to about 3,000 cold, shivering, underfed troops sitting on the west side of the Delaware. Most of them were going to go home in about a month when their enlistments expired. That General Washington would have the perseverance and the will to get those guys into those rowboats that Glover took across this river to attack these guys. Washington only lost a couple of people in the Battle of Trenton, and they died from frostbite, of all things. I mean, that tells you how poorly clad these guys were. And that, to me, you say 10 crucial days. That's your organization, and you nailed it. It's 10 crucial days. He doesn't make that crossing. The army dissolves, and the army was the one tangible proof of our country. It wasn't Congress for a lot of reasons, but if that army had dissolved, I don't know what we would have had. It couldn't have continued. And so I think crossing the Delaware and then attacking at Princeton and winning again at Princeton. Yeah, anyway, I just think that was the turning point. And in the South, it was an appointment. It was the Battle of Camden, which got Gates fired.
Yeah.
And Nathaniel Greene came in, and Nathaniel Greene was brilliant, as you know.
Yeah.
And he, I think he famously said, "I get beat, I get back up, I rise again and fight again," or whatever he said. And I butchered that quote, but that appointment turned it in the South, and that's where the war was eventually won, in my opinion, was in the South. The North was pretty much a stalemate. Nathaniel Greene made it economically painful to keep dragging out the war. France enters the war. And at that point, England, I think, said, okay, do we keep fighting this war to get colonies who we really just want trade with anyway? Or do we cut a deal and we deal with the French so we can protect our possessions, our more valuable sugar possessions in the Caribbean? And so they cut the deal wisely and got back into trading with the Americans. And England was smart. We were smart to do it that way, but that was a big deal to get Nathaniel Greene just to hang on. And not just hang on, but he drove a brilliant general, Cornwallis, out of the South, essentially, because he couldn't catch him. He couldn't bring him to battle. And when he did, it was just a brilliant part on Nathaniel Greene.
Well, and then as we move to victory, we have a very different task at hand. And you talk about the constitutional era, that period that at the end of after the Treaty of Paris and the Constitutional Convention, the country was really struggling to try and get on its feet under the Articles of Confederation. You tell the story of how we now start to become the political nation, and we come together. We all come together. All of the senators meet or the members of Congress meet to pull together the Constitution, and they have to really dig deep into the ideals of enlightenment to really figure out what is it that we really are. What were some of the most significant things that you learned about as you were putting together that section of the book in terms of pulling together the Constitution?
Well, even before pulling together the Constitution, I think the greatest contribution of General Washington was when he resigned his commission. People don't talk about that. On December 23rd, 1783, there's a relatively powerless Congress, as you know. The army adored General Washington. The country adored General Washington. And he voluntarily surrendered power to maintain the ideals of the revolution. And that was truly revolutionary. That, in my mind, was the other great turning point. It turned us from what could have been a military dictatorship a la Oliver Cromwell to what we have today. And I remember reading once that someone remarked that this was going to happen to King George, and he said, well, if George Washington does that, he will be the greatest man in the world. And that's coming from Washington's adversary, but it was unheard of. And I think that then took us down the path towards that constitutional convention. But the first thing that had to happen was Washington had to surrender military power to civilian authority. We
Which
lose
was
sight of
really,
that was really his, in my opinion. In fact, I wrote the chapter called Washington's Finest Hour.
yeah.
I think the best thing he did. What do you think?
Well, it was part and parcel with what he did throughout the war. I mean,
Yeah.
Washington was a brilliant politician, and the reason why he kept his job, frankly, throughout the war, despite some of his senior officers going after his job after some military blunders several times. The fact that George Washington gave deference to the Congress throughout the war, they could always count. Congress could, in the end, could always count on the fact that Washington respected that it was the civilian authority that was paramount, and that's that his handing over the power and resigning as commander in chief was just that was his that that was what he believed in, is that it was the people.
Well, and then and he had spent 8 years commanding the army, and in 8 years, I think he was home for 10 days, some incredible number. No one could tell him no, he can't go home, but he just didn't because of his devotion. He finally goes home in 83, and things obviously didn't go well in the Articles of Confederation. They, as you know, they want to convene. They meet in Annapolis. I think 5 states met in Annapolis. They talk about meeting the next year in Philadelphia. James Madison, who was devoted and just adored George Washington and a close friend until they kind of fell out later in Washington's life, helped convince Washington to attend the Constitutional Convention. And Washington, quite honestly, said, I'm not going unless we're serious and we're going to win. It's going to turn out the way it's supposed to turn out. And Madison had to talk him into attending. Just his presence there added gravity and weight to the Constitutional Convention. He said very little, as you're probably aware.
Yep.
It wasn't his space. Madison said a lot more, and some of the other guys, Gouverneur Morris. But having Washington there was a big deal. Having Franklin there was a big deal. We talk about that in the book.
Yep.
Ben Franklin was 81 years old, riddled with gout. He was wealthy. He was famous. He didn't need the headache of sitting in that stuffy room for 2 or 3 months in Philadelphia. But he famously also told his good friend, I'll do whatever my country asks of me in my last few years. And so Ben Franklin went, and to have those two hallmark men attend gave people the sense that what they were doing in Philadelphia mattered. If they hadn't been there, I don't know if it would have turned out the same way. And then, of course, you had the brilliant young minds of Hamilton and Madison, and they crafted, of course, the Federalist Papers afterwards. But that Constitutional Convention, got serious when they got Washington to preside and Franklin to attend.
I think many of our audience know that one of my favorite books that I think every American should read is David O. Stewart's The Summer of 1787, which is absolutely, it's like a movie, that book, in terms of what went on those few months that really established our nation. And we're still arguing over the articles and the Bill of Rights, and people are still trying to interpret what it all really means. But it's held up despite some horrific periods, for sure. And I think the arguing will still go forward, but it's been pretty solid so far.
Yeah, my concern, one of the reasons I started Americana Corner was I like the dialogue. If you read about the election of 1800, our 2020 election was nothing compared to that. I mean, it's kid gloves today compared with what they did back in the day. And but my concern is that they're now finding fault with our country. Jefferson found fault with Adams, and Adams found fault with Jefferson. And Andrew Jackson thought he got swindled by Clay and John Quincy Adams. But they didn't attack the country. They attacked the corrupt bargain. They attacked the Philip Freneau and the National Gazette. But now they're attacking the country, and that's why I'm concerned. That's why I started Americana Corner, to remind everyone that the country is fantastic. We're all blessed to be here. And if we have issues, if you don't like the president, if you don't like legislation, don't attack the country. It's your country, and you got to support it. I remember a toast one time was given, something like, I think maybe Stephen Decatur said this, my country, may it always be right, but right or wrong, always my country. And I just think that's a perfect sentiment that I wish people would have. And now I'll get off my soapbox.
No, that's quite all right. I mean, look, I think a lot of us in the public history field certainly feel the same way. I mean, it's I know I've become much more engaged over the last dozen years. The idea of making sure that people really know what the true history is, and to be able to do that, you need the tools to be able to be able to offer, and those include not only the videos, as we've talked before, that may draw people in. Even with Facebook, there are certainly posts that bring you to some interesting things to look at. In the back of your book, you have places to visit. I can imagine what you and Shar have done in terms of visiting all of these sites. Have you do you make it a point of making sure that you get to a few more sites every year, or how do you?
Oh yeah, Char's just the greatest. She's a blessing, top to bottom, and she puts up with me wanting to go to visit every historical site we go past. She doesn't let me stop at all the historical markers on the roadsides anymore. She got a little tired of that. But beyond that, it's just perfect. We visit these sites, and yeah, and I'll mention this also through this whole grant process. These sites are run by people, for the most part, just like us. And I tell you what's been encouraging, Roger, is to interact with all these early American history organizations and realize how many other people just love this country and want to do their part to keep alive the great American story. Because if you just read the mainstream media stories, you think, well, not many people feel like that anymore. That is not the case. I have to tell you that they're out there, and they're doing their best to at their own little local site to keep the story alive, and that's always so encouraging. But you love to go into these smallish historical sites. They're devoted. They don't have resources, which is another reason I started the Preserving America grant program. I have financial resources, but I'm only one guy. But if I get the money to them, they can do their thing just a little bit better. And so that's what I do.
You know, you mentioned earlier when you get all of the applications for the Preserving America grant program that you have people telling you the work that they're doing, what they're trying to do, and I can imagine that there's a set of best practices that you might be looking at in all of these grant applications. It would be um, that's a great resource in and of itself.
Yeah, there are some best practices that we look at if someone's applying for a grant. I'm not a social media guy. Most of us didn't grow up on social media. It's foreign territory to most of us. And yet a lot of these historical sites are staffed by people that look like us. And so one of the things we do is we require, I shouldn't say require, it works in your favor if you have social media savvy, if you are willing to do the Facebook, Instagram, Twitter kind of thing, if you have a website, because the greatest story in the world, untold, it doesn't have any impact. And so we encourage people that to have these sites, and it's not a deal breaker if you don't do these things, but it doesn't work in your favor. I'll just say that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have your site open. That's the best practice. Once again, you have a great site, no one sees it but you. At some point, does it become your hobby instead of America's blessing that they can see what you're preserving? And sometimes it's a personnel resource matter. There aren't enough people, enough volunteers to keep it open longer. I get that. One of the things we're looking at this year, we're expanding into a grant where we give up to $10,000 of social and site build out things. Develop your social media platforms. We'll do that. We'll pay for that. Create your website. Help get visitors to your park, which is another best practice. Get people there through events. Raise money. We all need money, and you got to have events at your place that are period related, hopefully site related. That's the best practice. You have to have meetings on a regular basis, and you have to have a board of directors to kind of figure out what you should be doing. And so if we see all these things, and then they want to do a couple of things that we really like, which are preserving places and things, especially living history things,
Mm-hmm.
then we'll generally give a grant to them. We promote and fund getting schools to sites, and we fund getting the sites to the schools. Well, in other words, we'll pay for people to go visit schools.
Right.
Washington Crossing Park, Jennifer Martin did a great job with that. They get kids out to their place. There's nothing more impactful in a kid's mind than seeing a fun thing, seeing these guys dressed up firing muskets. They remember it. So we pay for that. We're looking at starting to pay for people that live in the area that can't afford to go to a paid venue. We'll start paying for that. Those are the kind of things that we're trying to do to drive people to these historic sites. But those are some of the best practices: social media impact, site visitation, and operate like a professional organization to some degree. Board of directors, bylaws, and those kind of things.
So, I'm going to pick up on what you were just talking about, Washington Crossing. Tom, as you know, I'm one of the senior interpreters there,
Right.
And just 2 weeks ago, my colleague, my SAR Sons of the American Revolution colleague, and I went to a high school dressed in uniform, and had the opportunity to talk to 150 high school sophomores.
Sure.
And it's I love going into the schools. First of all, dressed in these uniforms, they you stick out like a sore thumb, obviously, but people are intrigued. They want to get your picture taken with it, which is really a lot of fun. But we have this idea that the kids don't care and that they're too busy with their on their smartphones and playing video games. These kids were really engaged. It was really a lot of fun. The To see the looks in their eyes when you talk about different soldier life and what the soldiers carried and what it was like in the in New Jersey during that period of time. You know, we take a look at all of these historic sites, and of course, we're focused in on the American Revolution. The one thing that I'm very proud of with the Sons of the American Revolution is that we have um, color guard units in every state, and my colleagues in the Sons of the American Revolution take pride in going into schools and talking to the kids about the American Revolution. This is all volunteer work, because we believe that this is something that we should be able to help our schools, public schools, private schools, all sorts of schools to teach teach this history. So Tom, you've alluded to your next project. Can you tell us any more about what's coming up with Americana Corner Press?
Yes, I finished the manuscript for book number 2 last weekend. It's on the 3 theaters of war. This book, An American Triumph, focused on the events that Franklin, Washington, and Adams touched, but it didn't cover a lot of things. Like, it didn't cover the war in the Mohawk Valley, didn't cover the war in the South, the war in the West. This book will cover those things, and my hope, good Lord willing, is that eventually I'll have I'll take us all the way through Reconstruction, 1876. Hopefully 1 book per year, good Lord willing, and that's my plan. And so this is book 2, and it kind of concludes at the end of the 18th century. And then book 3 will be the next set of really fun projects and topics, like the Louisiana Purchase, the War of 1812, an understated, not understood war, requiring Spain and clearing the Great Lakes of warships, and you know, the Barbary Pirates War. There's just so many great things to write about, and that's going to be in book 3. And as I said, hopefully get to 1876 eventually.
Well, and we're looking forward to continuing to learn more. So a reminder to everybody, you should go to americanacorner.com, sign up. The videos are terrific. The blog posts are great little snippets that will give you just the right dose of history for the day. And I applaud the work, certainly, that not only that you're doing to inform us, Tom, but obviously those of us in the public history field very much appreciate all the work and your generosity and philanthropy that you give to support our history. So job well done. And we look forward to hearing from you some more.
Thank you, Roger. You've been very kind to me to have me on, and I really appreciate it. And I'll just mention that if the grant program closes the window December 15th, and so if you want to get an application in, please do so.
Thank you. Next show, as I mentioned, is with Jack Kelly and his book on Benedict Arnold. That's December 12th. I look forward to seeing you all again. Thanks, Tom, and thank you all for joining us this evening.
Good.
Good night.
Thank you, Roger.